All right. With that, we are at 1:32 Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. First and foremost, thanks everybody for attending today. We've got, I hope, a meaningful presentation here to kind of talk and walk through the ins and outs of leveraging your military service to kind of use that to your advantage when it comes to career attainment and the pursuit of whether you're looking for a post-military career or to continue service, say in the Guard or Reserve, and maintain a civilian career. So we've got a handful of options here to make sure that connectivity is never an issue for you. Real quick, just to do a quick intro for myself, my name is Chris Newsome. I am Senior Vice President at Recruit Military. And essentially what Recruit Military does is serve as a military to civilian recruiting firm. So anybody that comes from our community, if you will, meaning you're active duty, you're going through the transition now or will be in the near future, you're a member of the Guard, a member of the Reserve, or simply a veteran status. You wore the uniform at some point. And military families, military spouses primarily. That is what we consider to be our military community. So we work to bridge the gap between you and the companies that want to hire and retain you. I myself am an Army veteran. I served with the 82nd Airborne, not to date myself, but I transitioned what feels like a lifetime ago now, back in 2006. So that was 15 years ago at this point. So I know the landscape has shifted a lot. We work very closely with Department of Defense and federal partners to ensure that we're always able to provide the most robust resources for any transitioning men and women, or again, anybody that falls within the boundaries of our community. So I've been through this. I've been a veteran job seeker myself. I understand some of the struggles and the cultural shifts that happen relative to your transition. And we've got a robust team that's at the low ready to make sure that we can make sure that we're all easily connected and that employment is not a barrier between us and success, whether it be transition or just navigating our professional careers. Real quick, I just want to take a moment, just some housekeeping to thank Jordana and the Recon Network for this particular event. You know, there's a lot of events out there. There's a lot of organizations trying to make sure that we're connecting America's military community with resources. And I just want to do a tip of the cap to Jordana for putting on this great event. I hope you had an opportunity to speak with some of the other or to attend some of the other sessions with the other speakers. I saw earlier this morning, we had Mr. Walter Hurd, the director from TAP, U.S. Army out of Human Resources Command. Really just a cool array of representatives to be a part of this event. And I'm honored and humbled to join their ranks. So again, tip of the cap to Jordana and everything that she's done to pull this event off. Recruit Military is honored to be a part of this and to sponsor the event as well. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And I promise this isn't going to be death by PowerPoint. There's a couple slides that I want to use just to give you some reference and to even give you a couple websites and resources that you can start leveraging today as you're embarking upon this journey. Again, whether you're going through the transition now or you're perhaps looking to make a career shift and you're a veteran like myself who's been out for a number of years. So we've got some materials, but I really want to keep this engaging while I'm going through this presentation. I won't be able to monitor the chat, but I do have a couple colleagues that are in the room as well. So if you do have questions in real time and you want to submit those through the chat, please do so. My colleagues will be happy to answer. And then at the tail end of this, I'm going to try to carve out at least a solid 10, 15 minutes so that we can open up the floor to Q&A as well. And happy to address any questions that anybody might have. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So if we're going to talk about employment, if we're going to talk about, you know, how you stand out as unique talent and where you sit as far as being the answer to a problem that corporate America has, we need to start by looking at what the landscape is in general. So bottom line, the most important takeaway from this is that we're seeing really great progress. COVID threw a monkey wrench in everybody's life. No way around it. Every single person in the world was affected by COVID. And unfortunately, going beyond the morbidity of, you know, the health and loss of life associated with COVID-19, there was also a direct impact on the employment landscape. Companies had to shut down. companies that are traditionally brick and mortar and require, somebody to be in the office, it was no longer an option. There were some jobs and even some companies that were lost and may never find their way back. But bottom line, we're currently in a state of progress and rebuilding. So last year, the main thing I want to point out here is that in 2020, at the end of the year, the national veteran unemployment rate was 6.5. And where we sit today, and these are based off of the Department of Labor statistics. So I know that there's some outlier data, but generally speaking, this is the best way to gauge how our community, how our brothers and sisters in arms are faring as it relates to the employment pursuit. So we're currently at just under 4%. What I want to highlight real quick is not just the progress that's been made only over the last 12 months, but over the better part of the last decade. For those of you that may have transitioned, a few years ago, or right around the time frame where the housing bubble burst, I'm talking 2008, somewhere between there and 2012, we saw, just almost an absurd unemployment rate amongst our demographic. And then when we got really granular and we focused at, the most common individual that was transitioning, and that's on the enlisted side. For the employers listening, keep in mind the vast majority of the military is comprised of the enlisted component. And most of the enlisted component is transitioning anywhere from that 4 to 8 year window. So that's anywhere from a 1 to maybe a 1 or 2 reenlistments. And then that's the most common time spent in the military on the enlisted side. So what we were seeing was a huge number transitioning from the military. And because of 9/11, it was a reflection of 9/11, 2001. We had a surge in enlistments, and we built our military up to be able to answer the attacks from September 11th. But on the back end of that, again, we fast forward 4 years to 8 years, we see not quite a mass exodus, an average number transitioning, but still a relatively high volume relative to the previous probably decade or so. So we saw a lot of men and women transitioning out, and some of them were borderline rushed out. Transition as far as TAP goes and transition programs goes. Every installation has a curriculum. Every branch, they're all in sync to a certain degree, but at that time it wasn't as robust and refined as it is today. So we had a lot of men and women that were leaving the military that weren't necessarily fully prepared. And on the other side of that coin, corporate America was not necessarily prepared. There was always a desire. The call to action to hire more men and women stemming from the military community was never difficult to push, to push that narrative. Companies genuinely wanted to hire more personnel. At the beginning of this, it was more, the narrative was they stood on the wall for freedom, they volunteered, they answered our nation's call when it was attacked. The least that we can do is welcome them home with open arms and with career opportunities. And while that's great to have that be the general mentality, what was missing was the business case for it, meaning data that supports that it goes beyond philanthropy or it goes beyond patriotism or altruism. We're not necessarily talking about our community being charity cases. We need jobs because we don't know how to find jobs. We are actually the top tier of talent that's out there across the nation, just generally speaking. If you think about it, the vast majority of Americans don't even qualify for military service. You can quasi-quote me on this. I know it's over 70%, but I don't know the true number. I believe it's 72%, maybe 73% of all Americans aged roughly 17 to, I think, 28 do not even qualify for military service. And that's because they have a educational deficit, a health deficit, or other related matters that would bar them from entering military service. I mean, if you think about it, the military directly discriminates because it needs top tier, military men and women to keep that machine oiled. So if you're flat footed, if you have scoliosis, if you don't have a high school education, those sort of things are no-goes. You're basically stopped at the door at this point. So right out the gate, military personnel represent the top tier of military talent. And that's the narrative that we've been working on with corporate America for the better part of the last decade. And it's starting to take hold. And that's where you can see that progress in that secondary number in that screenshot that I have there, that 3.9% unemployment rate. So that's as recent as September. October's data is probably going to come out this afternoon, if not early Monday. So I apologize for not having October's data, but I'm waiting on the DOL to produce that. So bottom line, this tells a really great story. We went from 6.5% down to 3.9%. And just a handful of years ago, well prior to COVID, we were in double digits in some markets. So the fact that our unemployment rate is so competitive with our non-service member counterparts is indicative of the immense value that we represent. So 3.9% in September, and that's actually just about a full percentage point lower than our non-military counterparts. So this is a huge stride. This was kind of unprecedented just a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, right before COVID, the veteran unemployment rate was closer to 2.7, the lowest that it had been in since the DOL started collecting that statistic. So again, I want to throw these numbers out there just to give you a taste for the demand that's out there for talent like ours, because I interpret the fact that our unemployment rate is a full percentage point lower as being we're that much more retainable. We're that much more a good fit for these various roles that corporate America has to throw at us. So we're making progress in that regard. And the fact that our unemployment rate is lower than our non-military counterparts bodes very well to the overall narrative that this is a good business decision for the employers out there that are trying to wrap their heads around, how can I fit more military talent into my organization, or why should I? There's data that supports that they're going to outperform their counterparts and that they're going to be retained a lot easier. So, these are good things. The data is leaning in our favor. When we look at the job market right now, we find ourselves in, aside from the unemployment rate, a very interesting time and place, because there are a ton of job openings right now. I'm sure if you follow the news in any way, shape, or form, or heck, if you just drive down the street, you're going to accidentally run into at least a dozen help wanted signs. We've seen, pizzerias that are offering $20 an hour for delivery. It's almost unheard of. They're literally starving for talent. And when we look at the raw numbers here, we're looking at almost 11 million open positions in the U.S. with roughly 8.4 million job seekers. So there are more jobs than there are job seekers. So, and that's not to take a dig on anybody that has not found that ideal career yet. What this means, the way that I interpret this and the way that I encourage you to interpret this, is that now is a great time to be selective and to not just go out there trying to find a job, but find a career. There's a world of difference between the two. A job will help you pay the bills. It's your 9 to 5. It'll get you from A to B. You can survive, generally speaking, depending on what your 9 to 5 is. But are you passionate about it? This is a great time and place to ask yourself some of these questions. Do I want to retire from where I am right now? Is the company culture great where I am right now? Are there other options? Here at Recruit Military, we run a lot of career fairs, and what we see in so many cases are a split audience, meaning we've got roughly 50% of the folks coming into a career and networking event that are looking for a job. Maybe maybe they just transitioned, or COVID, complicated their ability to retain whatever the previous job was. Now they're in the market for a new job. But the other 50% already have work, and these are the folks that are looking to not settle. They want to not find a job, but they want to find that career, or they want to get past whatever ceiling maybe they've walked into. Sometimes compensation can be stale. Sometimes access to promotion, can be unattainable. Direct managers may be hard to work with. We've all had bad leaders, whether in the military or outside of the military. Basically, it's a great opportunity to audit everything that you're doing on a daily basis for your job, for your career, and to ask yourself, is this what I want to do, moving forward? The average military job seeker is going to bounce from that first job that they get after roughly 18 months. So it's less than 2 years in the seat of whatever job most servicemen and women are taking post-military. the majority of them are not staying past that 18-month mark. So, where in some cases it's appropriate to ask that individual job seeker, that candidate, that veteran, that Guard or reservist, why'd you leave that job? Why was it not a fit for you? You can do a little bit of research on the front end to ensure that you're getting on board with the right organization. You got to consider things like culture and mission. Most of us are very mission oriented. We need a mission that we can get passionate about. Some people are passionate about crunching numbers, and that there's nothing wrong with that. There's some people that are passionate about writing code, doing IT. There's some people that are passionate about being able to solve problems and project management, or dealing with customers that have a problem. There are opportunities for everybody, regardless of what your passion might be. But I think one thing that we all have in common is we need that sense of passion in order to be 100% on board with the work that we're doing day in, day out. And it's hard to replicate that outside of the military. When I transitioned, I think I went through what a lot of you went through. It was, trying to find something even close to comparable to what you had done, whether that's the excitement that you derived from your MOS, or the environment that you worked in while you served, or again, just the passion of the mission. You're accustomed to doing something that's bigger than yourself. And dare I say, most companies offer missions that are along those lines, but not every company does. So I'm sure, everybody in the session right now has had at least a job where it took getting on the job to realize it wasn't for you. And that makes sense relative to that 18-month mark. In fact, I think that's a very generous amount of time to spend on a career path that maybe you're not super passionate about, but you gave it the shot. So, what we want to make sure at the end of this session is that you're aware of some general best practices as to how to navigate the employment landscape, but also how to wield some of the tools and resources that are at your fingertips. Because as you can see here on this slide, more jobs than there are job seekers. It's a candidate market. It's a great opportunity for you to, I don't want to say be overly picky, but you definitely do not have to settle for something less than you're passionate about. And that's the position that we were in. If you rewind back to 2008 or 2012, there was almost a sense of desperation on the job seeker side, to where, we would go into an event or engage with an employer. They would lay out the opportunity, and it was basically take it or leave it, because it was their market at that time. But now the tables have turned, in a very positive way for us as job seekers, and we can be picky. We can elevate ourselves. We can have confidence that the demand for talent like ours, regardless of what your MOS was or what your technical aptitudes are, there is extreme demand for us. And it lays out a lot of really exciting opportunities going beyond just the career itself that we might be pursuing. It's the environment. It is that culture. We're seeing companies needing to be very competitive in order to not only recruit new talent, but to retain existing talent. There's a very real threat that a company could lose talent to another like item, or another company exactly like them in their industry that's willing to pay them a little bit more, or to give them more flexible hours. The ability to go and pick our kids up off the school bus in some cases. We're seeing companies do all sorts of different things along those lines, offering gym memberships, offering daycare, on top of compensation, benefits, and work hours. So my call to action to everybody is to, one, audit your current self as far as your professional environment goes. Are you happy where you are, or are you looking for something bigger and better, or a better mission to get behind? And if so, explore your options. Get out there. Make sure you're networking. Make sure you're putting feelers out there. You can be a passive job seeker. And I'll kind of run through a little bit of how to do that. You don't necessarily have to tell your employer that you're looking for other work while you're looking for other work. It's very common right now. They're calling it the Great Resignation. There are many, many men and women, not just veterans, but all walks of life, that are saying, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, and I'd like to find something I'm more passionate about. And they're exploring those passions. So they're leaving the dead-end jobs. If you find yourself in a dead-end job, know that you are not pigeonholed to stay down that path. You have a vast array of options. And that's what I want to kind of highlight here. So more jobs than job seekers, candidate market, And that low unemployment rate speaks volumes to how in demand our current demographic or our particular demographic currently is. So I've got sources down there as well. I will try to share this presentation in the chat when all is said and done, or at the very least, make sure Jordana gets it so that it can be accessible to anybody that may want it. Staying along the same lines of thought here, as far as, what is the state of the job market right now? What's the economy looking like? That's great. There's almost 11 million jobs. What are the hot jobs out there right now? Some of these positions, what you're seeing right here is a reflection of best jobs as rated on Glassdoor. If you're not familiar with Glassdoor, it's essentially not a social media platform, but it's a rating system where employees for a given company can rate any given company and any given job title or industry. So you'll see here, there's actually a full list of 50, but for the sake of not hurting your eyes, I just went with the top 10 here. Some of these are very, very niche. You're looking Java developer, data scientist, dentist at number 10. These are best jobs, quote unquote. And I use those air quotes and literal quotes here because we have to consider that it's not necessarily census data. We haven't gone out to the entire world and asked what are the best jobs. These are users on Glassdoor, and the criteria for, annotating what is best is a little subjective. You can see here a lot of the salaries are on the higher end. Most are, either, 80K or into the six figures. So keep in mind, some people are assigning that best status based on compensation. I would also challenge you that while you're going through this auditing process and self-reflection, as far as what's important to you, that you think beyond compensation. Compensation is important for everybody. It's a motivator for literally just about any human being out there. It's a given. But are you willing to sacrifice your happiness for, a higher salary than what you have right now? And there is no wrong answer. These are just things that you need to ask yourself as you're going down this path. So these are the top 10 opportunities as rated or voted for relative to Glassdoor. And then under that, if you look at my bullets, you'll see the roles that were filled in October, the 500,000 plus roles that were filled, and most of them, as you can see, don't necessarily lend themselves to these niche jobs that Glassdoor is rating. So just because something's rated the best doesn't mean it's truly the most popular or the most applied to roles. So yeah, leisure and hospitality is right there at the top. It's booming back. It's finally recovering from COVID. That makes sense. It took a huge hiatus in 2020 and the beginning of 21 as vaccines were being rolled out, as the country and the rest of the world were trying to figure out how do we adapt and overcome and continue so that the economy doesn't take a hit. And industries like food service and leisure and hospitality are finally coming back because restrictions have been lifted and they can turn on that hiring switch once again and open up those floodgates. So it makes perfect sense that those industries are very popular. We also have transportation, manufacturing, construction, healthcare, and retail. And keep in mind, when you're looking at some of those positions, there's a lot of nuance to them. When we look at healthcare, it's not just physicians, it's not just brain surgeons. They need admin, they need IT as well. They need program managers, project managers. So, regardless of your background, I think there's a lot of opportunities for you to kind of sleuth through to identify, again, a role and a company that's going to be a good fit for you. It's no longer just a matter of, begging to get hired because, there's too many candidates. There's not enough candidates at this point. So it's a good problem for us to have as we're job seekers, looking at finding that next awesome career. So to look at, what we can do as individuals to stand out as that solution to that company's recruiting strategy, it's important to be able to advocate for yourself. And I know that can be difficult sometimes for those of you that may be going through the transition now or just recently went through the transition, or you will in the very near future. We talk in terms of we. It's not a lot of I did this, I did that. You're on a team, whether you're literally running a team, a squad, a company, a platoon, battalion, brigade, whatever the case might be, whatever the scale might be. We talk in terms of what the team or what the collective did. That's a point of military service. You're doing something bigger than yourself. So when it comes to positioning ourselves individually to corporate America, it can be tricky for us to talk about what we personally did. But it's very doable. And keep in mind, that is what these companies and these recruiters and these hiring managers want to hear. Anytime that you can quantify what you did, managed 40 missions over the course of a 12-month span, with zero negative impact, high safety rate, managed millions of dollars of equipment. Understanding how to kind of translate some of your military experience is going to be a big part of this, of how you position yourself, because naturally, as a military, as a member of the military or as a veteran, you naturally possess a wealth of experience, but the recruiter or the hiring manager on the other side of the table may not know how to interpret that or make those assumptions. One of the things that we're doing at Recruit Military to try to bridge that gap is to help these organizations bring on veteran talent into their recruiting machine, so that it's advocation from one veteran to another, and you also have a team member that understands some of the jargon, that understands some of the experience levels that may not be completely apparent to the untrained eye. And that's what we're encountering in a lot of cases. There's a lot of untrained eyes. I'm sure some of you have gone to career fairs or have engaged with employers only to be rerouted back to their websites, or it wasn't a very intimate conversation. You didn't get a ton of detail. That's common, and that's because it's not just about military hiring initiatives. A lot of these companies are still working to refine their HR processes in general. So keep in mind, when you're coming to them, you got to stay away from the jargon. You got to stay away from the acronyms. They don't understand what it means in many cases. So understanding how to go through that translation is important. And I've got a couple resources that I'll recommend to you to be able to do just that. But bottom line, the characteristics, the virtues and the values that are instilled in us from day one of basic training or a boot camp, or if you're a military spouse just enduring, living the military life while the significant other is training, deploying, PCSing, you have a wealth of experience and value that a lot of companies really, really need. They just don't understand how to find it. And sometimes it's right in front of them and they don't know how to find it. So again, bridging those gaps, understanding that you as the job seeker do have some ownership over that communications gap. You've got to make those translations. Try to make it as easy as possible for some of these recruiters. The average recruiter is going to spend 6 seconds on average looking at a resume. So you need to make sure that your resume is concise. Use the KISS method. Unless you're going for a federal position, your resume should never be more than 2 pages long. And that 2-page resume should never be a general resume. If you have a professional profile, that's fine. Have a general resume that articulates who you are and your background. But generally speaking, when you're applying to a specific role, you need to cater your resume to that role. So, again, you do have some ownership over that. Don't just hit the apply now button and cross your fingers that all those sweet, tasty 6-figure jobs are going to fall into your lap, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's not how it works. You've got to lead with your best foot forward and articulate why you are the best fit. As a veteran, as a military service member, you have preferential consideration. We're a protected class at this point. That's a great thing. And it gives us elevated consideration. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed a job. You're still competing. You're still competing with your non-military counterparts and then your other military counterparts, your battle buddy to your left and your right. So you need to stand out as being the best fit for this organization. And the best way to lead with that is to, again, make some of those translations, bridge those gaps in communication so that the recruiter or the hiring manager understands who you are, where you're coming from, and why it's such a seamless fit into the role that you might be applying to, or for rather. So, these are just givens. I'll rattle off the bullets right here real quick. Working efficiently within an organizational system. Again, you're used to doing something bigger than yourself. Regardless of your rank or how much time you spend in the military, you were part of a team. You were part of a large unit to some degree. How extensively you can speak to that is relative to how long you served and what your position was. If you were team leader, squad leader, platoon, company level, whatever the case might be. But bottom line, Every company needs that. It's a no-brainer. It cannot be taught. So many of our virtues and values are only acquired through experience. That's what makes us so hyper unique. And companies now, again, have gotten away from the philanthropy and the patriotic side of hiring military, and it's data-based. And they understand why we represent the solution, to the problems that they have with recruiting. You've already been through rigorous training and completed it beyond satisfaction in many cases. We operate in a zero fail environment. You don't have a choice to fail. It's just not an option, and I was having a recent conversation, and I'd say if I had to cherry pick any attribute that I brought with me from my military service that has served me well almost every day of my life, it's the ability to adapt and overcome, and the ability to put any obstacle in front of us into a perspective framework, meaning, everything is going to be a little bit easier, relatively speaking, on the other side of the gate, with your civilian career. This is what I tell employers all the time. I promise you're not going to be able to throw anything at these guys and gals that they haven't done a harder version of, and that they haven't solved that a similar problem with less than desirable resources, with a borderline unrealistic timeline sometimes. And, they always exceed expectations because it's beyond us. We're doing something that's bigger than us. When we fail, we don't fail as an individual in the military. We fail as a unit. We fail as a team. We fail as a company. Again, whatever the scale might be relative to how you served. So all of these attributes are just beyond essential to any organization's culture and bottom line value for their employee pool. The ability to deal with people in numbers under pressure, again, a little redundant relative to what I just said, well-versed in small unit leadership. There's nothing that can be thrown at us that we can't handle to a certain degree. And again, it's because of our experience. It's not something that's taught in a college classroom. It's taught in the school of hard knocks, to be a little corny there. So good news is corporate America finally understands that a whole lot more. And the value to us as job seekers is, when we're looking at a job description and we see the prerequisites and we see the experience requirements. Now, don't quote me on this because it doesn't apply universally, but what I have seen in many instances is those requirements in those job descriptions are truly more preferences than anything else. They are willing to take certain experience, that can trump some of that on-the-job experience that they might need. So where your military, your MOS or your rate or your code may not translate one for one over to a civilian job, your experiences can backfill for some of the on-the-job experience that a lot of these companies need. And bottom line, if it's technical in nature, as far as the job or the industry or the company, many companies are willing to give you on-the-job training now more than ever because of the labor shortage, because they're having such trouble getting the right personnel, where before they could make it a mandatory requirement that you had a certain certification. Now, if the right candidate is interested in the role, they'll help you get that certification in many instances. If it goes beyond using your GI Bill or other benefits, a lot of these companies are willing to give you that on-the-job training so that they can focus on those compelling and super important characteristics that each and every one of you has. So again, take this, and use it as a means to be confident that you are in demand. You just have to understand how to articulate what you've done. And some of those virtues and values that I have bulleted here are just inherently invaluable to any given company. So this one's going to be a little hard on the eyes. I'm going to see if I can move this. Bear with me. Okay. Understanding what your resources are. You're not alone, first of all. You need to remember that regardless of how rocky your transition may or may not have been, or where you've gone next, whether you've stayed local to the installation because you retired or you were med boarded, whatever the case might be, if you went back to your home of record, if you went to a different market to follow a buddy, a significant other, an opportunity, whatever the case might be, you're never alone. So many resources are there to follow you that you can take advantage of that don't have geographic boundaries. But what we have found is that many individual cities do have local assets and resources that are always, good for you to know that they're there. And most of them can be found with a simple Google search. But understanding your resources that you have to embark upon this journey are very important and indicative to your success. So I had mentioned a couple slides ago, understanding how to translate your military experience to civilian terminology. Now, that's super loose. Some of us have done very obscure things. I'll throw myself out there as an example. I was infantry. When I first transitioned, I did not really understand how to articulate the fact that because I was though it be junior, I was a non-commissioned officer and I had management experience. I had done program management without realizing I had done program management because that wasn't actually a line item in my job description of my MOS, but I had all of this experience in management that under my belt that I just didn't know how to use it. So I tried to follow what I considered to be the path of least resistance, and that was to follow my MOS, looking at government contractors to do security details, going back overseas, doing executive protection sort of work. And I did some of those jobs. They're not beneath me at all, but it wasn't necessarily in line with what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I needed to go and make myself a little more marketable, pursue my education, get a little civilian experience under my belt till I could find the right path. So try to wrap your head around translating your military experience, and it doesn't have to be a literal translation. Sometimes it can be as simple as that, based on your rank, based on the level of team or unit that you were in command of. That's your management experience right there. So you can go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I suggest a really great place to start is ONET Online. If you're not familiar with it, it's military crosswalk, and to a certain degree it's an MOS code translator. I recommend you approach that with caution because you don't necessarily want to use an MOS code translator, meaning just because I was an 11 Bravo doesn't mean I want to do 11 Bravo stuff for the rest of my life. But you can go into this military crosswalk and find core elements and attributes within the job description of that MOS that you can use to serve as a starting point to articulate that translation. So I always recommend that as in terms of being able to articulate who you are relative to what you did. Because you got to keep in mind, if it's an MOS code translator, it's approaching that problem in a very black and white sort of way. You were this, therefore you're going to be that. When we all know that's not necessarily the case. 60 to 70% of everybody from our community that transitions finds a civilian career outside of their MOS. In some cases, it's very easy to make a lateral move. If you're an 88 Mike in the Army and you're a truck driver, you can get your CDL in a streamlined sort of way and be a truck driver on the other side. If you are a registered nurse within a military healthcare facility, your credentials are the exact same as a registered nurse in any civilian hospital. So when it comes to some of those really core technical MOSs, IT-oriented, engineering-oriented, sometimes there is that one-for-one, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're passionate about forever. It's just what you did when you served. So again, do some of that soul searching. Make sure that you're going down a path that you're passionate about. But ONET Military Crosswalk is a great resource to get started. I highly recommend it. That's the URL right there. Check it out today if you get a chance. Low-hanging fruit, LinkedIn. If anybody's part of this session or the event over the last 2 days and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I challenge you to do it today. It's professional social media. It's not like LinkedIn. It's not like Twitter. It's not like Instagram. You get one picture, make it a professional one, not a picture of you, in a kayak with your dog. Make it suit and tie, pantsuit, something either business or business casual. And this gives you the ability it's an online resume, effectively. It's a live resume where other professionals can understand who you are, what you're interested in, and it's a great tool for sourcing for opportunities as well. And what I always recommend doing when you're leveraging LinkedIn is to marry its usage with your career pursuit, meaning everything has to start with an online application. I'm going to jump ahead to another bullet down there. Use job boards and employment vendors. This isn't just a shameless plug for Recruit Military, because there's other job boards out there. Bottom line, we want you to use whatever is going to be effective for you. If we can help you, that's what we're here to do. We have hundreds of thousands of opportunities, but I digress. Everything starts with the online application. For those of you that have been to a hiring event or have dealt with a recruiter that has told you, here's where you apply, that's where it starts, and you walk away thinking, why did I come to this event when I was just told to apply online? I could have done that from home. The answer is yes, you could have, but you couldn't have gotten face-to-face or shook a hand or made eye contact with that person from home, unless it's a virtual career fair. Those are out there too. Use them. But everything has to start with an online application, because that's how you get into a company's applicant tracking system. A recruiter wants to bring you in the front door, and from there, you're going to be oriented down to the specific department or unit within that organization that oversees that particular role. That's when you'll get connected to a hiring manager. So manage your own expectations a little bit as far as, when you're initially engaging with an organization and an opportunity. And remember, it all starts with an online application. It doesn't really matter how senior the role might be, whether it's entry level or executive level. There's going to be some level of online application, because everything's digital. It's 2021. So I encourage you not to fight that. Just embrace it, because it is the way that it is. But by using LinkedIn, you can apply to that position, and then you can go into that system and find an actual recruiter directly from that organization and follow up with them directly. And that's in terms of if you haven't met them personally already at a hiring or networking event or something like that. If this is an initial application, use LinkedIn as a means to follow up so that you can introduce yourself as well as manage your own expectations. It's a great opportunity to say, I applied to this role. I'm very excited at the notion of, potentially working for your organization. I would love to know if you have any best practices for me, or what the follow-up process might look like. Thank you for your time. That sort of thing. So LinkedIn gives you access in a very unique way. If you're not using it, you just have to. It's a heck of a force multiplier. So I'll jump through these next two because it's redundant. Hiring events and job boards. They're out there. Again, Recruit Military has them. We pride ourselves in being one of the best out there, but that's up to you to decide. For anybody that may have been on an earlier session, we had Mr. Walter Hurd, the director for U.S. Army Transition Assistance Program. We work directly with his team. We're a formal contractor for the Army, for the Department of Labor. So, we have resources available to you. But again, at the end of the day, the one thing that's important is that you're getting connected with employers, and whether that's through us or another entity, it's inconsequential. So we're here to be a force multiplier for you. We run over 100 events a year. Our job board is comprised exclusively of positions that employers have come to us and said, not only are we hiring, but we specifically want to hire military personnel for these roles. I believe there's roughly 450,000 open roles right now. You can search by your zip code, by keyword. You can even search by your MOS. So check that out. If you're not a member of recruitmilitary.com, I want to do a real quick plug to encourage you to do so. And by virtue of doing that, we're going to connect you with alternative opportunities as well, to include getting access to a mentor. We work with ACP. ACP has been a part of this event over the last 2 days. If you haven't sat in on one of their sessions and there's any to go, I encourage you to do so. They've got just a phenomenal program where they're going to plug you in directly with a mentor from the industry that you want to work for. So, and it doesn't just have to be because you don't have a job. You could have a job and you're stuck, or you're kind of stagnant. Compensation, upward mobility, whatever the case might be. A mentor can help you navigate some of those obstacles. I use a mentor to this day, and I have no intention of leaving my current employer or role. But it's good to have a mentor to use as a soundboard and to help you constantly have your finger on the pulse with professional development in an external stakeholder sort of way. So if you come into Recruit Military, you're going to be introduced and send an application to get a mentor through ACP. Same thing with DAV. I'm going to skip a bullet down at the very last one. You need your benefits squared away. You need access to whether it be local, state, regional, federal benefits. Get an advocate, get somebody that's a specialist. We've all been at the mercy of some VA experiences where it's less than desirable, or it's complicated. It's hard to navigate. DAV will help you do all of that. So again, so much of what we do in conjunction with DAV, and we'll make sure that we get you introduced to them as well, because if you don't have sound mind, body, and soul, employment could fall apart. So please keep that in mind. And really the most important one is the one that I just briefly skipped over, and that's do that soul searching. Understand what you want to do. Be able to answer that question that every guidance counselor in high school ever gave you. If you never had to worry about money and you could do anything that made you happy, what would it be? Because if you can identify that and find a way to turn that into an occupation, you never work a day in your life. And that holds water. That's true. So many of us find ourselves in jobs that we don't love, and it feels like it's slowly killing us, as we just chase a monthly paycheck. So do some soul searching. Make sure you're where you want to be, or that you're going where you want to be, and understand how to identify some of those cultural elements that might be very important to you within an organization. So find what you're passionate about. Identify your must-haves, really map them out. I need to be passionate about the mission. Compensation needs to be squared away. Company culture needs to be to the point where it's going to make me want to stay. How long is my commute? Do I have flexible work hours? Can I work from home? Can I pick my kids up off the school bus on Thursdays? Whatever the case might be, map out what those must-haves are, and then use that when you're going through initial negotiations and discussions with those hiring managers. So that is what I would recommend to you as far as identifying, leveraging your resources here. So parting food for thought, just a synopsis of what we've run through. Every company in every industry is hiring right now. I can't find an exception. There may be one out there, but demand is extremely high for talent, generally speaking. And then when we get even more granular and we look at top tier talent, like the military demographic, the demand is even higher, a full percentage point higher relative to the unemployment rates. So we have data that helps these employers understand that this is not just a high five to the military community or a flag waving effort. Data suggests these are really great hires because they're going to exceed expectations and they're going to excel in the workplace. Unemployment rate being as low as it is shows us that we're in high demand. We're very resilient and we're very adaptable. Adapt and overcome. Huge core lesson from the military that all of us should have learned at some point. Corporate America needs us. Make yourself present. Announce your presence to the workforce. Again, another shameless plug. Create your professional profile on Recruit Military. Make sure your resume is squared away. Make sure you understand local hiring and networking events. Participate. Say yes. Put yourself out there. It's called social capital. The more people you know, whether professional or otherwise, the more opportunities tend to find their way to you. So make yourself present as much as humanly possible, and understand that you own your destiny. You own your journey. You can't outsource every element of your life, but let alone you can't outsource every element of employment. You got to have some skin equity in it. If somebody else wants the job for you more than you want it for yourself, be prepared to have a not so awesome job. So own your destiny. You've got to put in that work. You've got to make those translations. You've got to make sure you've got your 30-second elevator pitch squared away and you're ready for that interview or whatever the case might be. And then accessing career attainment force multipliers, other support services that are out there, whether it be resume writing, mentorship, job boards, events, anything that's out there, leverage it. Nobody is an overnight success or a one-man band or a one-woman army, by doing everything for themselves. We all have support mechanisms, whether it be personnel or just resources that we have at our fingertips. Leverage them. It's not a sign of weakness. Do whatever is going to help you win the fight. And in this case, the fight is career attainment. So leverage those services however you can. That's my best advice to you. And with that, thank you once again. I am again humbled and honored to have been a part of this discussion, of this event. Another tip of the cap to Jordana for everything that she and her team have done to make this event, to bring it to us, to give us an opportunity to connect a little bit further. I'll drop my LinkedIn profile in the chat here. I'll stop screen sharing here in just a second. But again, if Recruit Military can be of service to you, that's what we're here for. Our sole purpose in life is to make sure that you've got access to the employers that want to hire and retain you. So we're here for you, and we're working with some pretty exciting organizations. thousands and thousands. If you want to work for a government contractor, you want to go work for Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, we're working with those sort of organizations. You want to go into the financial sector, Goldman Sachs, US Bank, USAA. It does not matter what you're passionate about, what you did, what you want to do moving forward. We have some level of representation for you there, and all kinds of different scales. It's not entry-level positions. Most employers understand that you are better qualified than an entry-level position. If you're going to school and you need something to subsidize, maybe that's a route for you. But generally speaking, companies need leadership. They need managers. They need go-getters. They need people that don't need to be micromanaged, and that's us. So I assure you that demand is there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to bring up the chat here and see if there are Renee, thank you so much for dropping my LinkedIn in there. You saved me the work there. I appreciate it. We've got another 8 minutes until the next session. So if there are any other questions coming in, I'm jumping over to Q&A, or we can just keep it in the general chats. I'm here. Please leverage me. Ask me anything you might have. I've been in this industry for, over a decade now. My transition was a little bumpy. If you want to talk about transition, or if you want to talk about ease of access to employers, whatever the case might be. So I am here, and I will shut up to give everybody a chance to type in any follow-on questions that may not have already been asked. Thank you, Enrique. I appreciate you. Okay, I'm seeing Aaron first. Have you encountered transitioning folks that are roughly 4 to 6 months out and you find a job that excites you? How do you approach the company knowing that job will likely not be there? Great question. So managing expectations, not just your own, but also some of those recruiters. Again, I'm not trying to do just a shameless pitch here, but I can speak intimately about what Recruit Military does. When we're hosting our events, whether it be a virtual event or an on-base event, we're having a unique discussion with employers, helping them understand, hey, some of these men and women have a window as far as date of availability that may not even be until next year. Aaron, you mentioned 4 to 6 months. That's good, for many of these employers. They can work with that because a squared away company has hiring projections already mapped out, typically anywhere from 6 to 12 months in advance. So when we're consulting with companies, we're asking them, what are your projected hiring needs? First, what are your immediate hiring needs? But equally importantly, what are your 6 to 12 month projected hiring needs? And that way they can start to position to recruit for a position that may not need to be filled for another handful of months. And the other thing, Aaron and everybody, a really important selling point that we use for these companies is the fact that if you're coming directly from an active duty station, which I know not everybody is, but generally speaking, everybody has access to relocation assistance because the military has to pay for you to go back home. And if you're not going back home and you're going to another market, the military is going to pay for that relocation. So if you can engage with a company that far in advance and let them know, I need no relocation as it would already be taken care of. I'm simply interested in the opportunity and I will relocate for it. That's a godsend to so many of these companies because many of them are trying to force square pegs into round holes sometimes because their talent pool is geographically limited. So if you're coming from the active duty or if you're a spouse and you're PCSing and you know where you're PCSing to, do that outreach to those employers, start applying to some of those roles. And when you get to the point where you can have that conversation, it'll typically start with an initial email that'll invite you for follow-up or for an interview. And that's where you can kind of lay that out for them. I'm a transitioning soldier or Marine or airman or sailor. And my earliest date of availability is going to be March 3rd of 2022. Does that align with your hiring needs? You have to have that conversation. So there's never going to be a set rule out there as far as that goes. But what we've seen with the thousands and thousands of companies that we work with every day is that that's okay. That's not a big deal. Now you have some companies that are literally starving for talent and they need them to start yesterday. you can't help them with that, but for most of the roles that are going to be more leadership oriented, management, strategic oriented, these companies are projecting that the onboarding takes time in some cases. And keep in mind, the hiring life cycle for every organization is different. If you're talking to the FBI, we work with them, it's 12 months from the first time you meet them to when any kind of rubber is going to meet the road. There's a lot of interviews. There's a lot of, background checks and things like that. Every company has that to a degree, and the onboarding process typically takes a couple months. Having that conversation and saying, can you put in your 2 weeks today? That does happen, but I wouldn't say that's the most common thing. So I'd recommend just having that conversation on an ongoing basis. What are your thoughts? Jordana, I'm jumping down to you real quick. I'm not sure if I'm doing this in order. What are your thoughts on how long someone should prepare for transition? Most transition programs now give you at least 12 months. And if you're retiring after 20 years or more, you typically get 2 years. Now, I know there's tons of people right now that are saying, yeah, they say that, but we don't get that. We still have to go out and train. We still have our jobs. We can't just pop smoke for 12 to 24 months. I understand that, but it's important for your command to understand that that is a priority and that is a legal mandate. Mr. Hurd, who was the director for TAP that was speaking earlier this morning, is a great point of contact to lean on for that. If anybody on this session has any particular instances where that's been an issue or a barrier, engage with him and he'll be able to give you the best path of how to mitigate that problem. But generally speaking, at least 6 months, from my perspective, you need 6 months to be prepared. Do that soul searching, make sure your resume is squared away, understand how to network, get a mentor. Get a mentor as far in advance as you can. If you're working with ACP, it's 12 months. You get a 1-hour monthly session for 12 months, and you should start that as soon as possible because you can't be over prepared for transition. It's always going to be a little bit of a mess only because you're going through such a huge culture shock. The military invested years, in some cases decades, making you what you are in terms of your service. And then you're given, a year or a couple months to transition. It's not adequate sometimes. So do as much as you can, take the lead yourself, get that mentor, talk with your transition service manager, go to as many TAP classes as humanly possible. Yes, more than just the mandatory ones to get that stamp. There's a lot of valuable information out there. List of upcoming recruit military events. Jordana, awesome question. Thanks for the plug. Yes. If Renee or Veronica are on this, if you could please drop into the chat, into the Q&A chat, the direct link to our full schedule. We've got our schedule mapped out to the end of 2022. So tons of events, register for them, attend. Some are virtual, some are physical. Join us however you can. Great events. Everything we do is cost-free. So, meet with these employers. They're hungry to talk with you. What is the next step to establish your profile and recruit military to help soldiers getting employed? Great question. So a lot of our system is algorithmic. When we recognize an individual has a certain background, they're going to be match made with a like entity. For example, the NSA wants everybody with a STEM background with a TSSCI clearance. If you enter our ecosystem and you annotate your experience and it reflects that, you're automatically going to be introduced to the NSA for that example. So the more you can complete that profile to 100%, the more easy it is to get you connected. We will pair you with jobs. We will pair you with organizations, and our recruiters will be in there as well, looking to do direct placement services for you. So complete that profile as much as humanly possible, and you're going to get ongoing engagement from us to make sure that we can get you connected as quickly as possible. So complete that profile to 100% and let our system and our personnel take over, and we'll take care of you. So with that, I am right at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So I'll stop here. If anybody else has any questions, by all means, in the general chat, my colleagues have dropped our LinkedIn profiles. Connect directly. Happy to talk with you one-on-one. Anything that we can do to help you with, we're here for you. We understand your experience, from myself to the rest of my team. Everybody's coming from being deeply involved with the transition space. So we like to pride ourselves as experts, and we're here to help. So lean on us however you can. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and jump off here so you can go to the next sessions. Appreciate you.